Facing off against riot police, setting cars on fire and blocking roads. Protesters in Atlanta gather close to where Rayshard Brooks died on Friday night. The 27-year-old father of three was reported for being asleep in his car at this fast food drive-thru. Officers say Mr. Brooks was drunk. Following a violent struggle with Mr. Brooks, it's alleged the 27-year-old took a police taser and turned on the officers. He was then shot and later died in hospital.
I don't know how to do this because I never knew I was going to have to do this. I watched this on the internet, from the whole George Floyd situation to us coming together like we're doing something. And this whole thing landed on my doorstep with my little cousin.
Following an outcry over the police's use of deadly force, the city's chief of police, Erica Shields, offered her resignation. Atlanta's Mayor KEISHA Lance Bottoms accepted, calling the police action unnecessary.
I firmly believe that there is a clear distinction between what you can do and what you should do. I do not believe that this was a justified use of deadly force and have called for the immediate termination of the officer.
All this comes just weeks after two students were violently dragged from their car by 6 Atlanta police officers. Charges against the students were dropped. 4 of the officers were fired and all 6 face criminal charges. Now the city is facing another crisis following the shooting of Rayshard Brooks. His family lawyer says there are serious questions about what happened.
We talked to some witnesses today who said that the officers went and put on plastic gloves and picked up their shell casings after they killed him, before rendering aid. We counted 2 minutes and 16 seconds before they even checked his pulse.
Both Georgia's Bureau of Investigation and the District Attorney's Office have launched investigations into Mr. Brooks' death. According to reports, this is the 48th officer-involved shooting this year. 15 of them were fatal. The death of Rayshard Brooks comes at a critical time in this nation's history. Protests over the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis continue across the nation. The death of another African-American man at the hands of police will surely only add fuel to a long-burning fire. Andy Gallacher, Al Jazeera, Miami, Florida.
Okay, let me bring you some live pictures from Atlanta where protesters are still out on the streets. You can see a thinned-out crowd there of protesters. There are police officers on the other side of that little crowd of protesters. But earlier on, within the last hour or so, at one point, protesters had fanned out across the N85 interstate, which is a major road that runs through Atlanta, and it essentially blocked the traffic and were met by lines of police who moved towards them and started arresting people. It was shortly after that that some fires, which had already been lit in the grounds of the Wendy's fast food restaurant where the altercation originally took place, had then led to a fire being set in the restaurant itself. We have seen some pictures of the building itself ablaze, but these are protest pictures live from Atlanta. Of course, we're keeping across this situation. We'll bring more bring on this as soon as we get it. Meanwhile, Jason Nichols is a senior lecturer in African American Studies at the University of Maryland, College Park. He says officials are listening to the outcry that followed the death of George Floyd, but more needs to happen.
Had there not been the outcry that we've seen over the past couple of weeks, you would not see the level of accountability or transparency that you're seeing right now. And I think partly, whether we like to admit it or not, it was the large-scale rebellion that included destruction of property that I think is pushing people towards making the right decisions and not trying to cover things up and trying to keep the population more in line and let them know that change is coming. I think what we need is, in terms of accountability, is when you have an act of force and it's going to lead to a lawsuit, you better believe that Mr. Brooks' family is going to sue the city of Atlanta for this incident. And so what they need to do is make sure that when they get a judgment, that judgment doesn't come out of the taxpayers' pockets. It comes out of police pensions. They are the ones who are responsible for these acts of violence, so they need to be the one that foots the bill.